I recently came across a story online about a woman who freed her husband from prison using a helicopter. Now, it seems straight out of a movie, and I didn't know if it was real or fake, and it turns out it's an old story that's resurfaced. So today I'm going to be giving you the details on what happened. Nadine's tale is one of extraordinary love and audacity. She was a regular French wife and mother until her husband, Michel, landed behind bars. Michel wasn't just any inmate. He was a seasoned criminal with a flair for escape. By his mid-30s, Michel had been jailed repeatedly, 10 times since the age of 17, and had already been pulled out of prison 3 escapes before. In 1985, he was convicted yet again, this time for a botched bank robbery and the attempted murder of a police officer, earning himself a hefty 18-year sentence in Paris's notorious Santé Prison. For most people, that would be the end of the story. But Nadine was not like most people. This devoted wife was about to hatch a plan so daring, sounds like the plot of a Hollywood blockbuster. The crime and arrest. Michel's criminal career set the stage for the desperate plan that followed. He had always lived on the edge of the law. In 1981, Michel and accomplices attempted an armed bank robbery in Paris, during which a police officer was shot and wounded. After several years on the run and multiple escape attempts, he was finally recaptured and brought to trial. In March 1985, the courts threw the book at Michel. 18 years in prison for the failed robbery and the shooting of the officer, La Santé Prison became his new home, a grim fortress where France's toughest criminals were held. But if authorities thought Michel would quietly serve his time, they were mistaken. Michel immediately began plotting yet another escape, and this time he had an invaluable partner on the outside, his wife Nadine. Nadine was deeply in love with Michel and shared his unwillingness to accept a life partner. Seeing her husband locked away and facing nearly 2 decades in his cell, Nadine made a remarkable decision. She would be the one to free him. It didn't matter that she had no background in aviation or criminal breakouts. What she possessed was unwavering determination and a bold idea that no one would expect, breaking Michel out by air. As Michel languished in prison, Nadine was quietly preparing their great escape. She realized that the prison walls and armed guards could be outmaneuvered with the right approach. Quite literally, from above. Sometime in 1986, Nadine enrolled in helicopter flying lessons, starting from scratch with a singular goal in mind. Learn to fly a chopper, rescue Michel. It was a plan so crazy, it might work. Over the course of months, Nadine poured all her energy into mastering the controls of a helicopter. She earned her private pilot's license specifically for this mission and began meticulous practice runs. To avoid arousing suspicion, Nadine used a fake identity. She presented herself as Lena Rijon, a sporty 30-year-old woman with a newfound interest in aviation. Under the alias, she started renting small helicopters from a local airfield on the outskirts of Paris. In particular, Nadine frequently rented a white Alouette II helicopter, the very craft she intended to use for Michel's escape. She became a regular at the helicopter rental company, showing up about twice a month like clockwork. Sometimes she went up alone to practice. Other times she brought along a friend. She always paid in cash. About 2,200 francs, around $350 per hour, which helped avoid leaving a paper trail. To the rental owner, she seemed just like another recreational pilot. If a bit eccentric, in reality, Nadine was fine-tuning her rescue operation. She scouted landing sites, studied the prison layout with Michel's input, and coordinated timing with him. Every detail had to be perfect. Any slip-up could mean death or recapture for Michel, and serious prison time for Nadine as well. Despite the risks, her mind was set. She would do anything for love. Of course, Michel was doing his part behind bars. He teamed up with a fellow inmate, Pierre Hernandez, who was awaiting trial for robbery charges. Together, Michel and Pierre surveyed every inch of the prison from the inside, looking for an escape route. Initially, they hoped the helicopter could land in the prison courtyard, but they quickly discovered nowhere was large enough to safely touch down. So the plan evolved. The helicopter wouldn't land at all. It would hover just long enough for the escapees to grab on. Michel also knew the biggest threat was the guards opening fire during the attempt. So he and Pierre came up with a clever trick to distract and intimidate the guards at the critical moment. They managed to acquire some small, round objects from the prison cafeteria and painted them to resemble grenades. It's pretty smart. In fact, they were nectarines painted green to look like hand grenades. Armed with these fake grenades and a makeshift fake pistol, the inmates could stage a convincing threat. Imagine someone holding a nectarine up to you and calling it a grenade. Hopefully enough to make the guards take cover instead of shooting them. It was an incredible risky ploy, but Michel and Nadine left nothing to chance. By late May 1986, all the pieces were in place. Nadine had the training and the helicopter. Michel had the internal plan and a partner in crime. The date was set for Michel's fourth and most daring prison escape. The escape. The morning of May 26, 1986 was clear and sunny over Paris, perfect flying weather, and perfect for an escape. Around 10:30 in the morning, inmates and guards heard an approaching thump, thump, thump in the sky. Nadine, piloting the rented Alouette 2, skimmed low over the city rooftops. She ignored frantic warnings from the air traffic control. Flying that low over Paris was very illegal, and boldly made her approach to the prison. Adrenaline must have been coursing through her veins as the gray prison complex came into view. With steady hands, Nadine brought the helicopter to a hover just over the designated rooftop inside the prison walls. Down below, the prison was already in chaos. Inside, Pierre and Michel sprung their distraction into action. They had slipped away from their work detail and made their way up to the rooftop. Along the way, they confronted guards with their faux weapons. Pierre brandished the grenades, those harmless nectarines painted war green, while Michel waved a fake pistol. They shouted threats, and the guards backed down. In the confusion of the moment, the ruse worked brilliantly. Alarms rang out and guards were yelling, but many just took cover, genuinely fearing for an explosion. Over the guard radios, panicked reports crackled that inmates had grenades and a helicopter, a scenario beyond their training and belief. The distracted guards hesitated and didn't fire a single shot. Within minutes, Michel and Pierre Hernandez burst through a rooftop doorway, emerging into the daylight on the prison's roof. Above them was Nadine in the helicopter, rotor blades chopping in the air and kicking up dust. Nadine maneuvered as close as she could safely, but there was nowhere to fully land, only uneven roof tiles and a small access shed. Instead, she steadied the chopper in a hover a few feet above the roof. Michel made a run for it and leapt, grabbing the skid of the helicopter, or a rope or ladder had even been lowered. With every ounce of his strength, he hoisted himself up toward the chopper's cabin. Nadine held the aircraft rock steady. His comrade Pierre suddenly lost his nerve at the very last second. Hernandez decided not to go. Perhaps he froze in fear or calculated that surrender was safer. Either way, Pierre dropped back and meekly gave himself up to the arriving guards rather than clinging to the helicopter. Now it was Michel and Nadine, husband and wife, flying away in an act that had defied all the odds. Within moments, Michel was safely inside the helicopter and Nadine banked away from the prison. Not a single gunshot had been fired at them. Guards and prisoners alike were left staring in astonishment as the white helicopter rose up and vanished into the distance. It was a clean getaway. Nadine flew a short distance to the south of Paris, landing the helicopter in a wide-open athletic field. Some sources say it was a soccer field near the university campus, not far from the Port d'Orleans area. There, as prearranged, a getaway car was waiting for them. The couple ditched the helicopter. Police would later find it and carefully inspect it, not believing it wasn't booby-trapped. Nadine and Michel jumped in the car, speeding off before authorities could swarm the area. In a matter of minutes, Michel was free. Against all conceivable odds, thanks to Nadine's piloting skill and courage. It was one of the most daring prison breaks France had ever seen. The aftermath. The sensational escape made headlines around the world. French authorities were stunned, and more than a little embarrassed, that a prisoner had literally been plucked off of a prison roof by a helicopter in broad daylight. Nadine and Michel became fugitives at the top of France's most wanted list. A massive manhunt launched to track down the couple, and police units across the country were put on high alert for a while. It seemed as if they had vanished into thin air. In truth, Michel and Nadine went into hiding, and they stayed hidden for over 4 months. In a bold move, they even managed to retrieve their 2 young daughters from state custody during that time. Authorities had been watching the children, expecting the fugitives might contact them, but Nadine and Michel still found a way to snatch them back under the noses of surveillance teams. For a few months, they lived like ghosts, always one step ahead of the law. Their legendary breakout had given them a taste of freedom, but couldn't last forever. The couple's luck ran out, unable to leave Paris, or perhaps unwilling to abandon their old habits. Michel returned to what he knew best: armed robbery. Not the move. In September 1986, barely 3 months after the escape, Michel and Nadine were allegedly involved in another bank robbery. In Paris, this proved to be their downfall. Police, now extra vigilant, responded rapidly. In the ensuing confrontation at the bank, a shootout erupted. Michel was shot in the head by police during the fray. Miraculously, he did survive. Though he was critically wounded, he eventually emerged from a weeks-long coma. Nadine was cornered and arrested before she could flee. The jailbreak duo had finally been caught. Their brief chapter of freedom and crime spree came to an end in a bloody scene, a far cry from the romantic rooftop rescue that had captured the public. For Michel, the aftermath meant returning to captivity. Once recovered from his injury, he was put on trial yet again and shipped off to a maximum security prison, where authorities made certain he wouldn't escape a 5th time. In fact, Michel did attempt one more escape a few years later with the help of another woman, who would become his second wife. This dude, while he was in prison. But that attempt failed. Ultimately, Michel served a total of 27 years behind bars before he was finally granted parole in 2003. Nadine, who had risked everything for love, also faced legal consequences. She was charged and convicted for her role in the helicopter escape and the subsequent crimes. Nadine spent a few years in prison by herself, but was released in the late 80s. By that time, her relationship with Michel had effectively come to an end. The two went their separate ways. After the dust settled, their fates seemingly a bittersweet epilogue to an incredible story. In conclusion, their audacious plan was pretty extraordinary, and if there isn't a movie, there should be. But in the end, they were caught, and it just lent its hand to a badass story. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Remember to subscribe and like the video if you haven't already. Really appreciate that. And I think, this is our first escape video. We've done true crime, survival. If you have any video ideas, let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. I'll see you on the next one.